Okay, let me introduce myself. I'm Andrew Newman. I'm Professor of Islamic Studies and Persian at the University of Edinburgh and Chair of the British Institute of Persian Studies Outreach Committee. And let me welcome everyone to our May webinar series for 2022. Let me introduce our speaker for today. Majid Daneshgar is lecturer and researcher of Islamic, Central and Southeast Asian Studies at the Oriental Studies Department of the University of Freiburg. He's an alumnus of the Freiburg Institute for Advanced Studies and was also the Marie Curie Fellow of the European Union and the George Gray Scholar of the Auckland Libraries. Majid has taught courses in Islamic Studies, Islam and Southeast Asia, Religion and Science at the University of Freiburg and the University of Otago and Otago Medical School in New Zealand, as well as the University of Malaya in Malaysia. His publications include two monographs, Studying the Qur'an in the Muslim Academy from OUP 2020, and Tantawi, Jawhari and the Qur'an from Routledge in 2018, and also three edited volumes, Deconstructing Islamic Studies from Ilex and Harvard University Center for Hellenic Studies 2020, Islamic Studies Today, Essays in Honor of Andrew Rippin, Brill 2017, and the Qur'an in the Malay-Indonesian World, Routledge 2016. He has published a number of articles on Persian-Malay, including a very old Malay Islamic manuscript from Indonesia and the Malay World 2022, Shaving the Prophet, Dar Islam 2021, Indonesian manuscripts in Iran, in Indonesia and the Malaysian World 2021, and an old Persian-Malay anthology of poems, Dabir Journal 2020. He has also received the George Gray's Award of the Auckland Libraries, through which he compiled an edited catalog of Islamic and Middle Eastern manuscripts throughout New Zealand. Majid, without further ado, please carry on.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Hello, Andrew, Sylvia, and thank you, British Institute of Persian Studies, for inviting me and for your kind introduction. So, as you know, I want to talk about the Persianate aspects of the Malay-Indonesian world. So let me share with you this screen. Okay. All right, so first of all, let's talk about the concept and geography of Persianate world. So we have a classical definition, which if you go through older manuscripts, early literature, you can see that they specifically mention the geography of the Muslim world based on their language. So for example, some legal works tell us about the popularity of Turkish, Persian, and Arabic language across the Muslim world. So therefore, they had an idea that wherever people were speaking Persian, so they were part of the territory of Persian-speaking Muslims, or even Turkish and Arabic same. But this idea developed over the centuries. What the most popular thing is the Balkans to Bengal complex, which emerged out of the important works of Marshall Hodgson, later borrowed by Shahab Ahmed. But usually, you know that people try to ascribe it to Shahab Ahmed, but earlier in 1970s, Marshall Hodgson talked about this issue. We have Persephone by the late Professor Bert Fregna, and his idea was about the Qalandariyya Zaban Farsi, or trans-regional language and lingua franca. And after that, we have the Iranian world, which was, within a few, I think during the last decade, Hamid Dabashi talked about this issue, which was taken from the French arguments, former French source Le Monde about the Iranian world, which was quite popular in the 1980s. So after that, Hamid Dabashi also used this phrase. But we have recently, within the last few years, we have Balkans to Bengal complex plus Turkestan and Soviet Union. The eastern side of the Caspian Sea became a part of the Persianate world. And we have two important works of Professor Green and Professor Amanat and Professor Ashraf. Both of, these two works are really good and important and tell us about the borders of the Persianate world. So we know that from Balkan, let's say, from the northwest Turkey to to South Asia, to Bengal, we have an idea that this part could be the Persianate world or Persianate zone. About the concept and geography of the Malay-Indonesian world. So Sayabija or Sayabija is a classical term you can find in Arabic and Persian materials and former classical hadith or traditional sources produced by Arab or Persian thinkers. After that, we have Zirbad or pre-post Safavid period was quite popular, this term. During the Qajar period, Machin, we also use in Safavid era, but during Qajar period, Machin or Mahachin, which is a greater China, was another part of China, I mean, became very popular. After that, we had Tahturrih in Arabic and Persian sources, you can find it too. We have Java, Siam, Malacca or Malacca, pre-post Safavid and Qajari period. You can find a lot of these references too. Indian archipelago. We have, including island of Java, Borneo, Malay Peninsula, and Siam, which is Thailand actually. So we have Malay archipelago presented by, mainly by the famous British scientist, Alfred Wallace. We have Malay Peninsula again. We have Insulindia or Insulinde by two Dutch scholars in the 19th century. We have Dutch Indies as well as the British Malaya by Richard Winstead, which was quite important and for a long time. And it gives a sort of a colonial impression you will get after reading these sort of materials, but they are quite important. And then we have the Malay word by Anthony Jones. We have also Malay-Indonesian word by Peter Riddle and also Naqib al-Abbas. We have Indonesia, the Malay word, and but what are they? I mean, the countries, Burma, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and are the main parts of the non-Islamic Buddhist land of Southeast Asia. Well, my concentration is on Brunei, Indonesia, and Malaysia as Islamic regions of the Malay-Indonesian world. Okay, before going further, I want to share with you about the status of Persian, scholarly works dealing with Persian and Malay-Indonesian world, and or Persian and Malay-Indonesian literature, and vice versa. I mean, Malay-Indonesian, Persia or Persianate zone. So former scholars like Van Ronkel, Bauzani, and you can see the list. So they work on different aspects of Persian in the Malay-Indonesian world. Some of them work on inscriptions. Some of them work on the relationship between different communities. I mean, political approach. Some of them works on seals. Some of them works on dictionaries, and some of them works on cultural aspect, anthropological aspects, and so on and so forth. But as you can see, since 1888, we have the first, as far as we know, the first academic or scholarly work produced about contribution of Persian or Persian Shi'i contribution to Malay-Indonesian world was published in 1888. So since then, we have more than 100 works dealing with different topics in which you can find reference to Persian contribution to the Malay-Indonesian world. The other side, we have scholarly works Malay scholarly works on Malay began in the 19th century in Iran. So mainly during the Qajar period, the Nasrid period with Nasr ad-Din Shah. So they started to translate whatever was in foreign languages. So they started to translate different works in different languages into Persian, some of which were about the Malay-Indonesian world. So I have a forthcoming article about this issue. And we have local manuscripts. Many people wondered whether we can find manuscripts in Iran from Malay-Indonesian world. So a few years ago, I found a couple of manuscripts, which are all of them held in the Parliamentary Library of Iran, Kitabkhane Majlis, and I published an article, as you can see, Indonesian manuscripts in Iran. And what you can see is a Javanese manuscript about Islamic theology, mainly that of Samarkandi. So this is what you have. So I want to tell you that since long time ago, people were talking about the relationship between these two communities and the borders, and they wanted to specify the borders of these two regions. And what you can see that most scholarly work deal with, cultural aspects, and we have rarely scholars paid attention to manuscripts, original manuscripts. So I tried to fill this gap by examining a number of manuscripts, which most of them held in the Leiden University Library. Let's start with the first one. Code OR 5658 of the Leiden University Library. Origin is Banten. Date is, you can see the Banten here, yeah? The Banten is here from the late 17th century or early 18th century. It is about as a sort of praises to the Prophet and daily supplications, as a book of sama, which is listening to music and the singing of mystical poetry. The specific features of this manuscript is dedicated to Ali Ba'abbad and Hadrat Aidarus. The community is coming from Yemen, and Persianate musical modes you can find, which is quite, unique. Persian poets, Persian SHII supplications with local hands, and a form of Malayized Persian. So let's talk about the musical modes. So the first one, it is a bit slow. Yeah, okay. So we have Negame Rast. What you can see is a Negame Rast, which is quite popular. And we know that Negame Rast was used by in Arabic, Turkish, and Persian musical notes, but was more than other societies, very popular among Iranian musicians. So Man Salla Ala Tahab Tahami. So this begins with this one. So the second one is Negame, what you can see, Sika, but actually this is a Negame Sega. And what you can see is a transformation in the way Sega. Now let me show you with this laser pointer. The way Sega Gaf is changed to this form of local Gaf with 3 dots below, which is quite unique. And then it was practiced by Malay-Indonesian before the 18th century. معشر الأشاق أنتم فقراء ما عليكم بأس نام الوصل ويكفي ما جرى. So this is the Negame Sega. The other is Negame Chaharga. سلوا على دين العباد هو خير هادي. So what you can see is Negame Charga. Again, we have a different format of Chaharga. The Cha is changed to Jin, and then the Gaf comes with 3 dots below. Then we have the most popular types of Persian music. We have Negame Panjga, Sallu ala Sayyid al-Anam. What you can see, the Panjga Pe is changed to the Javi version, the Javi form of Pe, which comes with Fe with 3 dots above. And the Gaf again comes with Kaf with 3 dots below. So probably one may wonder, so we can find other sorts of Negame Rast, Sega, Charga, and Panjga. Use such musical modes can be found in Turkish or other Arabic or Middle Eastern musical systems. But what we can see, there are further evidence throughout this manuscript help us to conclude that there are some serious connection between these manuscripts and Persianate world. So we have Persian rhythmic poems, which are SHII-Sufi, or I'll tell you now how. سر ولي الخدا نور نبی مرتضی معدن جود الصفا شاه سلام علیه حیدر لشکر شکن باب الحسن الحسین سر خدا ابو الحسن. So you can see the meaning. So we know that we know that the Wali al-Khuda is a good translation of Waliullah, which is quite popular and describes Ali ibn Abi Talib. So and calling him as the light of Muhammad, also Murtada, all of them are the attributions of Ali ibn Abi Talib, which is quite Shi'i, telling us about the formation of Shi'itized Sufism and its emergence in the Malay-Indonesian world. And the Haydar al-Lashkar Shakan, all of them are attributions of Ali. Haydar means the lion, and Lashkar Shakan is a metaphorical term referring to the concept of someone who's brave. And the father of Hassan and Hussein, the mystery of God, Sirr Khuda, which is quite popular in Shia literature when they want to refer to the Ahl al-Bayt and God, the relationship between these two, they call them Sirr Khuda. Or the other side, you can see Madh Torah Jibreel go Rabb al-Dalil Qudwatu Qad Khalil Shah Salamun Alayk Ka'biy Ma Gu To Qibliy Ma Ru Huda Rao To Ma Hamihin Du To Shah Salamun Alayk. So what you can see is a sort of Gabriel praise him. So we have in Shia literature, mainly in Sufi literature, and through which they start to elevate Ali, and Gabriel starts to talk about him, and then compare his leadership, level of leadership, with that of Khalil, which is the attribution of Abraham or Prophet Ibrahim. as our Kaaba is you, and you can see the style of gu, Kaaba yama, gu, to. In gu, the type of guf is changed to 3 with 3 dots below, which is quite local. And then Qibla yama, ro, to. And the format of he at the end of Qibla is quite Southeast Asian format. Probably you can find it in Indian ones, but I have mostly seen such forms of, calligraphy and script in Javanese and Malay-Indonesian manuscripts. So all of us are your bondman or slave, and calling Ali as Shah is quite popular in Sufi literature. Okay. In this manuscript, you can also find poems of Persian saints of India, or saints of Sindh, is Usman Marwandi, or who is very well known across South Asia, or in Sufi literature, he's known as Lahl Shahbaz Qalandar, or Lahl Shahbaz Qalandar, is a very influential figure in Qalandariyya-Khaksariyya mystical path. And let me bring the next page. Yeah. Just a moment. Oh yeah. Okay. So what you can see is a poem, right? So, but even native speakers probably cannot read it easily. He came from Iran, right? After that, he moved to India, lived there, and died over there. But the point is that how we can read it. So let's go for the first 2. So you can see Rashida man badarayai kamaujas adami kharas nah keshi badaron durya nahamala ahaihi ajabkara. So it is very big, right? It's very hard to understand it. So what he wants to say. So this is what I call it in my article as Malaya's Persian. They understood what they wrote, you know, but this is actually the main thing. Rasida man badaryawi kamaujas adami kharas nakashti andaron daryaw. So this is exactly the way they started to produce something for local. They had their own understanding of Persian. They started to localize Persian. Therefore, I call it the Malay Persian. So you can see other forms, you know, Mushtaghan, Tarsi, they change sin with shin, which is changing sin with shin, bring 3 dots above. It's very much taken from Sanskrit when they wanted to change Sanskrit terms to Persian. To Malay or Javi, they started to use this, which is quite interesting. You can find a couple of such things, Betarshidam or Betarsidam, Azudarya, and such things we have. Okay, what about the next? Yeah, this is good. South Asian raised an important question in our mind. So for a long time, people did not touch upon this topic, whether Sufis were active across Southeast Asia, mainly Qalandars. Were Qalandars active across Southeast Asia? So this one will answer categorically. Let's go for the next one. The next manuscript is OR 8399, the Leiden University Library, Mandailing of North Sumatra. We have different names for Mandailing across North Sumatra, but I think that one is from from the late 17th, 19th century. I think some early inventories also mentioned that it should come from that side that you can see here, Mandailing. As a collection of Islamic treatises, so different risalat, you know, different risalat about different topics you can find throughout this manuscript. So the main feature is the writing skill of the author or scribe in switching from Arabic to Persian and back again to Arabic. So actually, this is a manuscript with 3 languages, Arabic, Persian, and interlinear Malay. So look at that. This is the thing that I want to talk about. Let's read here. هذا ما جرى على لساني في علم الحقائق من الكلمات التي هي كالشعر. وأما في كتاب المحققين من عقائد الصوفية هن صوفیان با عقاید علمای ظواهر هیچ مخالفت نیست مگر در ربط حق به عالم. علمای ظواهر ربط ایجاد حق به عالم میدهند. And you can see the translation. And interestingly, you can see interlinear translation. For example, for با عقاید علمای ظواهر هیچ مخالفت نیست, you can simply read it as Dabir Salahan. Dabir Salahan literally means there is no problem, no disagreement, not a problem at all, something like that, and which quite makes sense. And magar, however, except for which is Malay-Indonesian, translated as Malay-Indonesian, that you can see here, which quite makes sense. It tell us that, and next page is again in Arabic. So tell us that, okay, he was quite familiar with different languages, and all of them are with the same hand. At the end of the manuscript, this is clarified as well. The next manuscript, Persian, I mean, was used as Malay used Persian as an instrument to learn Arabic too. It is quite interesting. So manuscript 1660, Leiden University, found in Batavia, central Indonesia. This is a dated manuscript and quite important. 1919, October 1581, which is about Arabic grammar. So the features. Who was copied on Javanese paper. So some people like Bauzani, he worked on this manuscript in 1969, and he thought that probably it came from India, which is not correct because he did not realize or did not work on it, was not familiar with the quality of the paper, which is actually the luwang or the luwang, which is a local bark tree from central Indonesia, and tell us that so the manuscript should have come from there. And it was in the possession of the Dutch scholar or scientist or colonial officer who also translated many important works. And the third thing is that the identity of this manuscript remained unknown. So I started to compare this manuscript with different copies of works about Arabic grammar in different languages. And then when I was in New Zealand, I realized, okay, this manuscript is actually a direct translation of Marah al-Arwah by Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Mas'ud from 13th or 14th century AD, which was quite popular at that time, translated into many languages, and many people wanted to learn about it, mainly Turkish. But in 17th century, 18th century, it was translated into Persian, and its Persian version was printed frequently in India. No wonder, right? Not a surprise. In India in the late 19th century. And therefore, what we can say is that this is the first known Persian translation of Marah al-Arwah, and the first known Malay translation of Marah al-Arwah. And throughout, you can find Malay's Persian out too. So let's have a look at a number of, just a moment. Yeah. Okay. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So let's start from where? Amma ba'du, bidan in risalis. Again, you can see Risala seen with 3 dots below, right? Risalis dar ilm sarf musamma bi khulasa ilm sarf. So in Malay, you can see adapun kemudian dari itu ketahui olehmu bahwa risalah ini pada menyatakan ilmu saraf. Dinamai ia khulasa ilmu sarf. So which is the translation quite good, makes a lot of sense. And important is that it was copied on Javanese paper. Means that it was a very local. Okay, the second one. Oh yeah, the second one, you can see, for example, the translation is quite fascinating. Let's say with here, Mu'inul Islam wal Muslimin. This work was dedicated clearly to a king or ruler of the region. We don't know the name, it is not mentioned here, but it says Mu'inul Islam wal Muslimin. Yang menolong agama Islam dan segala orang Islam. Yeah. Muhiyya al-Sawr Afridun. Then from Arabic, Mu'inul Islam wal Muslim changed to Persian, Muhiyya al-Sawr Afridun. We know that Afridun in Persian is a name as a Freydun, yeah, the ruler, a king, a prince. So, and the translation, yang menghadupkan asar Afridun, and who's Afridun? He answers, ya'ni nam seorang raja, which is is the name of a king. So he clearly knows this story. Or let's go how he analyzed Arabic language, so Arabic grammar. So here says ya'ni agar fa dar awal kalimat wa agar fa dar dovum kalimat. Artinya jika fa pada pertama kalimat itu dan jika pada fa pada kedua kalimat bermula atas qiyas inilah dan huruf yang belum. So this is clearly tell you about the space, the place of fa, fa'ala taf'al. So the place of fa in ilm sarf.
So where fa is located, in the beginning or the end of the, or the middle of the term, or words, or word. Okay, another one is my favorite manuscript, is Persian-Malay Anthology of Poems. So quite important. And this is one of the oldest known Islamic manuscripts from Malay-Indonesian world. So its code is 7056 of the Leiden University Library, found in Aceh Lampisan, but we are not sure whether exactly it's from Aceh or not, because it was again copied on the Luang, the local paper. And when I published an article in 2020 about this manuscript, I received a very kind email from Dr. Annabelle Gallo. She advised me to send this manuscript to be carbon dated, and I sent it. As you can see, the result was 70%. Tell us about that was from 1450 until 1521, and 24% is lower chances, 1586 until 1623, and the theme of the work is poetry. So the interesting aspect of these manuscripts, so yeah, so it's a bit slow. Okay, specific features. You can find throughout this manuscript ancient forms of Malay terms, nasalization, Persian-Malay translation of Quranic Arabic, which is quite fascinating what you can see. So this here you can find 3 different, this is one of the first words-based translations and commentary on the Qur'an in the Malay-Indonesian world. What you can see, وَتَرَى الْجِبَالُ تَحْسِبُهَا جَامِدَةً وَهِيَ تَمُرُّ مَرَّ السَّحَابِ. So kau lihat segala bukit pada bicaramu, kau sangka diam ia itu, and then berlakia, and seperti, and the rest of the words. And then خود چگونه ساکن تواند بود؟ همه هر ذره از ذرات کائنات متحرک به حرکت اوست. Yeah. So betapa akan dapat diam adanya segala zara daripada zara mawjudat, and then we have the rest. And then we have هر ذره را کلمه‌ای و هر کلمه را اسمی و هر اسمی را زبانی. And then, for example, very nice translation, dan segala nama itu ada akan dia lidah. Very nice, accurately translated. And this is what you can see. This is the verse of the Quran. Then we have the translation and commentary of Fakhruddin Arabi. And this is actually belong to Fakhruddin Arabi. Very curious translation of Persian phrases you can find throughout this one. This is the famous poem of Saadi of Shiraz. Gale khushbui dar hammam ruzi resid az dast mahbubi be dastam. Yeah. Tana harum dalam hammam pada satu hari sampai ia, and what you can see very nicely translated into Bahasa Melayu. Yeah, and for example, the combination of Tomushki yau bedu goftam Tomushki yau abiri berkata aku padanya engkau kasturi atau ambarka. So kasturi atau ambarka is very much exactly Persian combination, and in many old Malay manuscripts, Malay Hikayat, you can find a combination of kasturi atau ambarka, mushku anbar. So it tells you about the origin of the manuscript, and this is a very good idea to learn about the origin of some of this unknown manuscript in the Malay-Indonesian world. And rare words and absolute words you can find throughout this. I mean, the words or terms which are not used anymore, you can find throughout this manuscript, or Malay's version as well. You can see here the term akse parto ehsane us. Here you can see akse parto ehsane us. Bayang pencara. The way parto has been changed to fe with 3 dots above, fa with 3 dots above, and then parto, which is quite exactly tell us about the importance of the way they started to Malayize Persian. And then you can see the debate of Maghrebi, Shirin Maghrebi, which is quite interesting, and this is my favorite too. Jannat arbab dil rukhsar janan didan ast. Dar chunin jannat ke goftim, you can see it's very difficult, right? They had their own style of writing. Dar chunin jannat ke goftim zanjabil hu nist. Okay, and here you can see, for example, kutaha or kutahu, or the kutaha, which is the term which it means to kujast.
where is it, huh? من بنده آسیم لطف عطای تو کجاست. There are some idea who was the main, the poet. Some people say Khayyam or say Abu Sayyid Abul Khair, but anyway, من بنده آسیم لطف عطای تو کجاست. تاریک دلم نور و صفای تو کجاست. And when they wanted to say, where is it? So he raised the question of, Kataha, and then they know that this term is not practiced after 17th century anymore. Maybe a few words at the turn of the 17th century refer to Kataha, but actually this is a Sanskrit term telling us about the ancient aspects of Malay orthography, and then the author himself, or maybe someone else, describe it in the margin. You can see Yani Mana Garang. Yeah? So it tells you about that, it means where is it? Okay, further manuscript, and the last slide is about further manuscript, which is, this one is Hikayat Amir Hamza, Qissay Amir Hamza, coded 7360 of the Leiden University Library. Very interesting, again, it's a combination of 3 languages at the same time. You can see first, وَبِين نَسْتَعِينَ وَالصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَى رَسُولِ مُحَمَّدٍ, right? And some spelling are not right. Katahui واللحم إنيلة قصة young مشهور كان عرب dan عجم is not really readable, maybe Sagala. Itu أمير المؤمنين حمزة رضي الله عنه وأبو طالب, now is Persian, but Abu Talib كأس عن فرزين حضرت رسالت پیغمبر. Again, the style of پیغمبر changed. Fe is written with fe, yeah, or fa. پیغمبر پیغمبر آخر الزمان محمد مصطفى sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And you can see they nicely situated along with each other. And asked on Farzin, Farzin means wazir or vizier, right? So this is very interesting. This is the manuscript of Hikayat Amir Hamza or Qissay Amir Hamza, one of the oldest Malay Islamic stories, which was recited by Malay warriors before they go into war with, Portuguese or foreigners. So this is what I wanted to share with you. Okay, conclusion. So what you can see, my idea is that Persian was used for or for the sake of political debates, as Professor Andrew Peacock had already shown us. This article about letters, exchange between different rulers, religious gatherings, what you can see about Sama session. We have mystical theological works. When they talk about the essence or nature of Sufism, Arabic instructions, Arabic grammar, in poetic literature and Islamic stories. So this is what you can see. I think that they had more close relationship with each other, and it deserved to be examined seriously in the future. So far, I have found more than 30 manuscripts, including Persian terms, Persian phrases, or like such old. Most of them were produced before the 18th century. And thank you very much. And this is the article that I published about the Persian aspect of the Malay-Indonesian world. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very, very much, Majid. That was fascinating. If colleagues and friends have questions, can you please post them in the Q&A, and then I can relay them to Majid. Thank you very much. I'm going to take the chair's privilege, as it were, and ask a couple of questions, if I might. You're taking off from your last statement that many of the ones with which you've come into contact were pre-18th century or by the 18th century. So especially in later 17th century and later 17th century Safavid Iran, an awful lot of religious literature, some of it quite basic on essential aspects of Shi'i doctrine and practice, were being either composed in or translated into Persian. And I didn't necessarily get from you that there were an awful lot of that kind of text that was finding its way that far east, for example. And in the process, I noticed that the text that you had on Sama'a was fascinating, because one of the big polemics in Safavid Iran was anti-Sama'a as a vehicle for the anti-Sufi literature. And some of that anti-Sufi literature was, again, appearing in Arabic, but some of it was also appearing in Persian as the century goes on. So I guess my question is, have you seen any of that kind of material that far east. Specifically the translations of basic sort of Shi'i faith, doctrine and practice primer texts, and also any of the anti-Sufi material that was being composed again, and also in Persian.
Thank you very much for this very good question. Actually, this is very interesting, because after Safavid, Iranian, delegations moved to Southeast Asia. So what we know that after Safavid period, they started to settle in Thailand, in Siam. So they started to promote Shi'ism as well. But recently I found, this is very interesting, I found a Persian manuscript. Will be published very soon. I found a Persian manuscript, during the early period of Safavid Empire, and Iranian delegations moved across Southeast Asia, and they did not stop in Thailand, but they moved down and they went to Sumatra, and they started to promote Shi'ism, and they used different languages. They, for example, promoted some Shi'i literatures, mainly those of Allama Majlisi, Sheikh Bahai. So they used them, or Kashkul. The Kashkul was, they copied Kashkul there, and then they were read by local people, and some Shi'is, the people married with local women, and they started to create a new territory for Iranians or Shi'is coming from South Safavid Persia. And for sure, I think they had their own, networks. They promoted their ideas. We have more and more data these days, and I think everything gonna change very soon. Yeah, did I answer your question?
Yeah, that's fascinating. I imagine the material is going to turn up.
Yes.
Be interesting.
And I was surprised when I noticed that Kashkul Sheikh Bahai is found in the Malay-Indonesian world, and people used to read it. And the people from southern Sumatra, we're in contact with them. We know that they contacted with Iranians in Thailand, but we didn't know that Iranians moved to southern Sumatra, and they had communication with local people. And Sheikh Bahai, Allama Majlisi, and I have a forthcoming article about fiqh, that Shi'i fiqh was read across Southeast Asia, mainly those of Kulaini. So we're read in Southeast Asia, which is quite interesting.
Wow. That's terrific. Okay, some questions have come in. Hi, thank you, Majid, for an interesting talk. I would like to know if we can trace Persian art in Malay culture, specifically architecture.
Yeah. I think the main expert of this area is Dr. Annabel Gallup. She knows many things about the Persian arts in that region. Yeah, absolutely, there are many. Yeah, in terms of calligraphy, in terms of mainly seals, the seals used by kings and rulers. Yes, you can find a lot, and textiles or fabric, and you can find all of them in. Yes, there's clearly a lot of evidence we have about the relationship.
And what was the name of the scholar you mentioned?
Dr. Annabel Gallup, the leading figure in the area of Malay-Indonesian Islamic Studies or Malay-Indonesian Manuscripts. Yeah, she's the head of Southeast Asian Studies Department in the British Library.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. Would not Persian origin personal names, some place names and borrowed vocabulary add to the body of evidence?
Pardon me? Where can I see the question?
You can see them if you go to Q&A. They should be available for you to see as the panelist.
Okay, I can see. So again, please tell me the question again.
It's the second one. Would not Persian origin personal names, some place names and borrowed vocabulary add to the body of evidence? And then there's a further thing from the same person. As a side note, I've always found, sorry, it's moving around, that the Thai term for foreigner, farang, is interesting.
Oh yeah. They used to use that. Yeah, quite popular. The farang, they got it from Persian. Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. But do you see any place names or other kinds of names?
Oh yeah, this is interesting. Richard Winstead, he believed that the western side of Malaysia, as well as Kelantan, there might be relationship between western side of Iran, the name, and he said that some towns, western coast of Malaysia, the names are taken from western side of Iran, mainly Khuzestan. And he has a special article about this issue.
What was the name again? What was the name?
Richard Winstead.
Okay.
Yeah, he's a
Oh,
colonial.
you mentioned him. Yes,
Yeah, Richard. Yeah, Richard Winstead, and he said that the name of Khuzestan, and yeah, there are a couple of more. Yes, I think there are. I think even. I think we have a few names from Malay-Indonesian world in Iran. So I'm not sure about them yet, but I think I found some evidence telling me or suggesting me that these names were taken from Malay-Indonesian prototypes or cities. So yeah.
Cool. Can I remind folks who may have joined a little bit late after the talk started that the tape has been, that the lecture has been recorded and will go up on the BIP's site. So if you want to get particular references and such that are being made now, and you didn't hear them originally, it will be available pretty soon. Another question. Thank you for your wonderful talk, Dr. Majid. I just wondered, could it be possible the contact between Indonesia and Persian started as early as 1370, such as some stories and such? Thank you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. See, the Bandar Sayraf or Siraf or Imbusher and Kharg Island, and even the Arabic sources, I mean, historical documents tell us about the relationship between Indonesians and the Iranians from the beginning during the Sassanid period. So Dr. Sutudenejad, Dr. Sutudenejad, I mentioned in my article, Dr. Sutudenejad, he examined archaeological relationship between Iran and Indonesia. You found many things from these two communities, but he mainly from the Buddhist land of Thailand, but he also referred to the relationship between these two communities at the turn of the 7th, 8th centuries. Before Islam, they had relationship. Plenty of Arabic documents or references that we have that tell us about the existence of Malay-Indonesians in the Persian Gulf. Also, As-Samarqandi in his book, As-Samarqandi in his historical report, he clearly mentioned that the people from Malacca, I think Malacca and the other, I think Sumatra and Java, they were residents of Hormuz in the Persian Gulf. Clearly mentioned this issue. It means that people were there, and absolutely they had relationships since long time ago, before the 14th century. And the article of Marison, Dr. Marison, 1959, I think, in 1959, he clearly described the relationship between Persian and Malays since long time ago at the turn of the 7th, 8th century, up to 14th, 15th century, after Taymurid and then Sultanate Delhi, and then up until the Safavid period. He clearly mentioned 1959. He gave us good examples. Yeah.
Okay, terrific. That's terrific. Another question and comment. Thank you so very much for this fascinating talk. My question is about Malay renderings of stories. And since you spoke briefly of Amir Hamza, I would like to know if you have come across any Malay translation of the Tuti Name among the manuscripts you consulted. Now, there's a second question.
Yeah, one of the most important, yes, one of the most important manuscripts in Malay. Obviously translated from Persian, is Tuti Name, Bayan Budiman, which they call Hikayat Bayan Budiman. So it is absolutely and you can find plenty of them are found across Malaysia and Indonesia. And Perpustakaan Negara Malaysia, the National Library of Malaysia, there are good copies of that one. I think they are available online, or Diwan Bahasa dan Pustaka in Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. In Indonesia, you can find a good number of these manuscripts too. I think the British Library and Leiden University, there are good copies of Tuti Name, which are Bayan Budiman, which are translated based on the data of Nakhshabi. But the question is whether they are actually faithful translations or they were mixed with other materials. But what we can see, the reference of Nakhshabi can be found in some of them. Yeah, in some of them you can find the name of Nakhshabi. But the point is that we have a lot of such things across Malay-Indonesia. And the people like Bergenski, can I show? Yeah, this book.
Please.
Yeah, this one. Vladimir Bergenski, his book, thoroughly talk about the Tuti Name and its relationship with Iranian or Persian literature. And he mentioned the name of Qazi Hassan. Who's Qazi Hassan? We don't know. but there are many. I was collecting some material to see or to find out who is this Qazi Hassan that who copied the manuscript of Tutankhamun. Yeah.
Now there's a follow-up to the same question from the same person. I have another question specifically about manuscript Malay 338 of Leiden collections entitled Hikayat Khwaja Maimun. Have you studied this particular narrative? Could you provide us any information about it? Is it a version of the Tuti Nome?
This is, again, you can find very good analysis of this manuscript. This is story of Khwaja Maimun is found in two works. One of them is that of the Bergensky. I think is very nice. I will write the name of this here. The name of the book. Vladimir Bergensky, or you can see the slide after that. And the other is the work of Richard Winstead. Yes, here, Richard Winstead. Both of them clearly analyzed the Khwaja Maimun's relationship with Tutankhamun. Look, all of them are vague. We don't have a, concrete answer for these questions. We don't know, but probably you can find references to them. Some of them refer to that one, Khwaja Maimun and Tutiname by Jan Budiman, but some of them remain on, because different variations we have, different types, different formats we have. Some of them short, some of them long. Therefore, we don't have concrete answer firm answer for such questions. But if you want to know more about them, these two books are really good.
Okay. There's a comment here of Edward Schaefer in The Golden Peaches of Samarkand mentions Malay crews on Persian argosies and Persian crews on Malay argosies in the China trade. Yeah, that may well go back to I have to read it in the Sun here, to the early Sasanian days of Siraf, as David Whitehouse's excavations suggest. Is any work being done on this?
Oh, good question. So I've been working on it. Not yet published, but yeah, the Siraf were in Bushehr, Kharg Island, Malay were really active in that region. And then Iranians, China Sea, and even throughout the Indian Ocean, they were quite active at that time. And I recently came across an inscription in China on which has been mentioned that Iranians, along with a few dato, and we know that dato is a title for Malays, with a few datos visited China together at the same time for 700 years ago. So it means that they were really close with each other. They understood each other with their own language, I think was Persian. And it is important to know that for a long time, we have some travel reports during Safavid period. We have that people in Isfahan were able to speak Malay. We have. So they were able to speak Malay, people across, and Malay was known as the Latin of the East. So we have clearly mentioned Malay was the Latin of the East. So it means that Malay-Indonesian were quite powerful. This is what scholar rarely touched upon. They're quite important. Their language was as important as Persian, and this is why I was searching a lot in libraries in order to find local Malay-Indonesian manuscripts in Iran that I found, and I believe that there are more. If you go, for example, I think if you go to, mainly in Isfahan or some central Iranian libraries, you can find good number of manuscripts which are probably written by or copied by Malay-Indonesians or were given to Iranians in Mecca. Yeah.
Yeah. And this was primarily sea trade. It wasn't overland.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. Okay. Right. Are there any other questions? If you have other questions, can you put them down into the Q&A and I can relay them? I wanted to ask one other question. You mentioned the Hekayat literature. I'm a little bit familiar with the Hekayat literature in Malaysian context. And I wonder, some of these are Shi'i type something. What's the connection between the Indonesian and the Malaysian? That I'm completely ignorant. Or is there none in particular?
You mean that the Shi'i Hikayat or Shi'i in the Malay-Indonesian world?
Yeah, that's right. Is there any movement down further?
This is a very good question, and there was a bit since 1888. People had idea about the nature of Shi'i Hikayat in the Malay-Indonesian world. We have some, for example, Hikayat Muhammad Hanafiya. For a long time, people assumed that this was a Shi'i Hikayat or written by Shi'i people. I published an article about it. I found the origin of this Hikayat, and I have a book about it very soon. And this hikayat was originally written by Sufis of between Bukhara and northern India, but it's full of references to Hassan and Hussein and their martyrdom in Karbala. And he called both of them as Shaheed. I mean, Hassan Shaheed, Muhammad Hussein Shaheed, and also called Muhammad the Prophet as Shaheed, a martyr. And we have also some hikayat, instructions, how Prophet instructed his daughter to treat her husband, Ali, which is said it was Persian, was Shi'i sources. But one of the most important works, which I think was quite Shi'i, very Shi'i, which was the one that I published with their Islam journal. I call it Shaving the Prophet, and the hikayat is Hikayat Nabi Burchukur, means shaving the Prophet. So this is a story for long, and at the margin of this one of these manuscripts kept in the Leiden University Library mentioned that do not believe in this hikayat because it was copied by a Rafidi. And we know that Rafidi is ascribed to Persians or Shi'is, right? So I started to search and find out, and after I think a couple of years, I realized that this manuscript is a direct translation of Fotovatname Sartaroshan or Fotovatname Salmanian, the people who were barbers, the book of barbers, which was quite popular after the Safavid period, right? So, and not a surprise that they call it a work by Rafidi. We have more, and then we have Hikayat Tabut, and I think an Indonesian professor, Fatima Sidqi, if I pronounce the name and if I recall correctly, Fatima Sidqi in 1960 or 1970, published an article in Indonesian and then published in French with Journal of Article about Shi'i stories in Malaysia. And also Dr. Michael Fiener and Formicki, they published a book about Shi'ism in Southeast Asia, in which you can find references to this one. And Dr. Edwin Wieringa of the Kuhl University in Germany, he published a lot of things about the role of Ali and Fatima in the Malay-Indonesian literature, and he detects or identify Shi'i spots throughout the Malay literature.
Very interesting. A comment here. Hi, Dr. Majid. I just wondered about Hekayat Bakhtiar. Is it still available in Persian? Is there a version of it in English?
So the question is about the English version and its Persian version.
Is it still available in Persian? One, and two, is it also available in English?
Yes. I think most of the a large number of materials in Bahasa Melayu, if they are taken from the Middle East or Central Asia, you can find their prototype in Iranian libraries. And for Bakhtiar, I recall something, but I'm not sure. But I think you can find it in Iran. But the English of Bakhtiar, I think some part of it were translated before, not the whole part of it. And the works, if you want to know about Persian literature and Malay hikayat, one of the best works, I think, apart from Brill, who wrote about Hikayat Muhammad Hanafiya, and Burgunski and Richard Winsett that I said, the works of Bauzani, Alessandro Bauzani, the famous Iranologist and Persianist of Italian, right? Quite fascinating. He did a great job. He touched upon every single issues related to Persian-Malay. At the end of, during the last decade of his life, he began studying Malay, and he was quite good. And he went here before the revolution. He went to Iran and delivered a very important lecture at the University of Tehran about Persian literature in the Malay-Indonesian world.
Right. Okay. Last questions, if people want to send them in. It sounds to me as if, again, may I interject myself, that a question would be, was it trade, commerce, mercantile activity that preceded any sorts of distinctly religious propagation into this region, whereas the conventional wisdom, for example, for the subcontinent, for Hindustan, is that it was Sufis came first and predated the commercial interaction. What's your take on that? Was it commerce and trade that preceded contacts, or was it sort of propagation of Islam? Yeah.
Yeah, for a long time, I think people assume that. For a long time, people assume that was promoters of Islam were main people, the people who brought Islam to Malay-Indonesian world. But later on, further evidence suggests that they were traders and merchants, and and you know that, or even they were some, for the sake of power rather than religion. People moved to Southeast Asia for the sake of power and developing their territories. And one of the good work is the work of Dr. Kowan of the 1940, who discovered the Persian inscription in North Sumatra. And when he wanted to talk about this issue, at the end of the manuscript, he referred to the name of Iranians, the court of Aceh, I think, or no, Sumatra. Yeah. He talked about Iranian active there. Most of them are, or military figures, Sepah Salar, and the name of the people. I think, absolutely. For a long time, people assumed that it was for the sake of religion, missionary activities. But after that, further evidence, and I'm sure that more evidence we can find that tell us it was all, or most of them were because of trading, as well as military aspects. And Dr. Bergensky has a lot of articles. One of them is about that Malay-Indonesians hire people from Khorasan in their army, and Greater Khorasan, from, let's say, Central Asia of today, or Khawaras, mainly Khawaras. So they were active in the court of, Aceh, and they helped their sultan. And this is the same because at the turn, when Islam, during the emergence of Islam, so Sassanids, so they hired Malays because they trusted them as good sailors, So they gave them the sea, the oceans, the Persian Gulf. So, the history repeated again, and Malay-Indonesians hired Iranians or Persians from Khorasan in the court, and we have a lot of evidence, and good evidence from Armenian archives we have too. So Dr. Bergensky's works are highly recommended, along with the names that I listed at the second or third slide. The name of people are really important. All of them did a great job.
Could you show us that's the book you were pointing to? Can you pull that out of the shelf and give us a shot here?
So there are many good books. So these are the things that I have in the library. In my library. So this is okay. So here is what you can see. So it's right. The Heritage of Traditional Malay Literature, Vladimir Bergensky. Yeah.
Great. We
have Malay Court Religion, Culture, and Language of Peter Riddle, which is about commentaries of the Quran, and talk about the Wujudiyyah, Wahdatul Wujud, and also the role of Wahdatul Wujud taken from Persian literature, Persian sources. And we have also we have the works of the history of classical Malay literature by Richard Winstead, published by Oxford University Press. We have works of many works, I said, Viringa, Dr. Annabel Gallo, all of them did a great job. So, and Bauzani, all of them good. The third slide of my work, Dr. Andrew Peacock did a great job, and he analyzed a good number of letters and documents telling us about the relationship between people in Persian Gulf and there in Aceh or Malacca. Fascinating. And if you want to know about the Iranians active in Buddhist land or Buddhist part of Southeast Asia, you can go through the works of Dr. Arash Khazani, or he did a great job, published recently a book about this issue.
That's absolutely terrific. That's absolutely fascinating. Very, very, very cool. May I thank Majid once again. The lecture has been live streamed on Facebook, but it's also been recorded. And again, for people who came later, want to look at it again, look at the slides and listen to the discussion as well. This will be available on the BIP's website. So Majid, this is absolutely terrific. Thank you so very much. This has just been very eye-opening to see how Persian culture has sort of made its way over the millennia, it seems to me, much further east. So this is absolutely terrific. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you.